and Pasi is there. Pasi is with us and has been doing research on not just participation within existing you might say political structures and systems, but also to look at the potential for urban civic activism as a force in itself, a self-governance force. It's research over the last few years, and there are a group of researchers. So welcome, Pasi, and welcome to this session and to your explanation of the findings of this research, which was not just theoretical, but actually a project-based research. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and hello from Helsinki again. I'm starting to share.
This is fine. We're saying this. This is good.
Okay, probably this is better. So, from Helsinki again. So, the participatory budgeting is great, of course, and I also participated with my daughter, 12 years old, so it was a great chance for her to participate in this kind of process at her age. Yeah. But still, it's something that the city government organizes for the people, and now we're going to talk something more, let's say, authentically bottom-up processes that there are taking place or have been taking place lately in the Helsinki metropolitan area and also somewhere else in Finland. And this is based on a project we had on what we call civic activism as a resource for the Metropolis of Helsinki. We had that a couple of years ago. And we asked that how do civic activism contribute to the development of cities, and also how could cities and state organizations utilize and support this kind of supportive, constructive civic activism, but a new kind of activism that there had existed, that we found out. I'm not going to talk about the latter question, but try to give you an idea of what kind of activisms we call civic or urban civic activism and what is new in them. And we focused on ecological sustainability and local innovations and local communities and civic engagement in those. And from these words, you can see that there's lots of same things that you can find, for example, Helsinki city government's urban strategy, for example. So people in the field, in the city, are working very much for the same kind of goals than the city governments are. So it could be rational that they could, when they in a way play in the same field, that they could also play the ball to the same goal. But let's talk about how we see the civic activism, what we mean by it right now. And not so much of its origins. We didn't so much try to find out that or answer that question, but something about it anyway. So by urban civic activism or civic activism, we mean emergent and self-organized, proactive and constructive co-action, typically outside of formal NGOs. So this is the new point. There are lots of NGOs in Finland, but now something is going on outside of them, and it has lots of outputs, and one of the impacts that it has, it is also that the formal NGOs are not so much are not doing maybe so well these days because of this new kind of activism. So primarily, it's a DIY action instead of oriented towards decision-making system. So these people are not usually interested in the city government or the politicians and what they do and try to have effect on them. They want to do something themselves, and usually pretty swiftly, not waiting for something that could happen next year, but something that we could maybe put up in a week or two. And it's very much based on networking in social media and internet solutions. So this is, of course, the reason why it's now taking place. Social media is and basically Facebook. We can say that this is a kind of Facebook activism, what we're talking about here. So we know a lot about social problems of social media, but this is a kind of brighter side of the coin of the social media that I'm talking about here. And it's a people-driven bottom-up urbanism. It takes place in urban places, but not always. And we shouldn't say that that it's something that's not taking place in countrysides, but we should understand that it just densifies in cities. Like everybody else, everything else densifies in cities. So some concepts which are pretty much parallel to our concept of civic activism. There are lots of them here. You can read them if you have time to. But the common point to all of this is that it's a kind of citizen engagement and new kind of agencies which are taking place outside traditional organizations. There are lots of new perspectives to this field. Some theoretical background, well, common to all of these. There's open data, people can use it. There's lots of sharing of information through social media and other ways. Lots of social interaction. It has been densified a lot due to digitalization. Lots of organizing and action between citizens in internet platforms. Many writers have written from their own angle, coming more or less to the same field that we're talking about now. And then some cases from Helsinki metropolitan area, mostly here. Restaurant Day, probably, or possibly you have heard of it. A couple of guys thought that it could be nice that anyone could cook and sell their food in parks and streets and corners and so on. But it was not allowed. And there are two stories of this, how it happened. The first one is that they did it although it wasn't allowed, and the second one is that they did it because it wasn't allowed. So there's a kind of a small point of anarchism here, and also in some other cases. Sompa sauna, you know probably that we Finns love our saunas, and they say that we have 1 million saunas here, but probably it seems not to be enough, because some people have thought that they want to build one more in a wasteland in a former harbor area in Helsinki. And it was not licensed at first at all, so then the city government came and demolished it, and they built a new one, and the government demolished another one. And after that, they started to have a conversation how to deal with this question. So a kind of anarchistic point of view, or starting point as well. There are guerrilla nature people sowing meadows with their seed bombs or something, for example. This actually started from Tampere, another area in Finland. There was a case in Käpylä in Helsinki when a community artist wanted to paint butterflies and birds in that kind of very gloomy and dark underpass, and it took about 4 years for them to have it licensed. And so what is this then? This is the process diagram of how they should have get licensed this project. And as you can maybe see from the picture, it's not very easy for a citizen to understand that kind of process diagrams. So we have a good, very well constructed welfare system in here in the north, but maybe sometimes it's a bit too strict in its norms. So it's not very, probably not very surprising that some people are starting to do something, and after that ask if it's allowed or not. Cleaning day, it's a kind of flea market day in Finland, in our cities, and about communal circulation economy. And they had the problem of how to register this, how to license these all sellers in these parks and so on. And the organizers made a map where to the net where people could just spot their own becoming place of selling, and then the city said that, okay, this is the way of registering them. So it's a kind of innovation of automated registering and licensing of some that kind of citizen engagement, which has been used elsewhere in Finland and also in other kind of events. So we heard about urban planning, yet there's kind of activism which is challenging urban planning in Helsinki. There's this Lisäkaupunki ja Helsinki, more city to Helsinki group, which tries to, or which wants to have more densified urban area in Helsinki, and it has been quite successful, and some people say it's also have been powerful. They had changed the planning context in Finland, and they had also helped the city planning department in implementing their densification processes and enriched the planning discussion here in Finland. There's also alternative planning groups, for example, this Urban Helsinki group, and it's been quite active. There are also some place-making cases here, so place-based ideation. We just put a bench and flowers to some corner, and then something starts to flourish from it. So we spotted 5 challenges for urban planning here. First is that we have this kind of new political engagement which are organized in social media. For example, this More City to Helsinki groups. And then we have this alternative planning groups. And then generally the social media utilization of it is a new challenge for the planners in Helsinki. Then this place-based urban development, but also sharing economy things. We probably come back to those later. They sometimes need urban space in a new way, so it has to be counted in a new way. So here, some ideas of or topics of citizen and sharing economy. For example, the citizen food network RECO, which is spread to 5 countries. 300,000 Finns are members of this in these Facebook groups, and so it's a pretty big thing in Finland. Local food straight from producers to consumers, and just a peer-to-peer network managing it. Lots of Facebook flea markets. This is something very popular in Finland locally. Lots of ride-sharing groups in Finland. Shared working spaces. This mushrooming, I think, has been exported to other countries in Europe as well. Crowdfunding is something that enables people to make their projects happen. Some time banking, where they change local P2P services, but they have had problems with the taxation authorities. Well, if you look at them, these civic activisms from a social movement point of view, you have this kind of block parties, for example, which occupy urban spaces in Helsinki or every time in different places. But and it also takes place in suburbs, although it's mostly something that in the city center is popular. In Roihuvuori neighborhood, there's a strong movement and strong sense of community there. Then there maybe a surprising thing that for example, this Konepaja movement, they try to preserve this kind of cultural activity in an old factory, and how they try to do it is that they called an American millionaire to finance it, their project with them. So a kind of activist capitalist partnership, and so probably this couldn't have been happening in 1960s, for example, when urban activism was probably anti-capitalist usually. So the question is now, is it really a non-political civic activism? Because there are a couple of reasons why it could be, because it's not reactionary. There's no conflict, protest, or contestation in the beginning. And it's not typically, as I said, it's not typically aiming at influencing the decision-making or even the civil servants' work, but it's straightforward action-oriented, although there are exceptions. But of course, politics is a complex question, and for example, from these point of views, you can say that it is political. For example, you can say that these activisms make representational claims, and they prefigure and perform things that could take place. For example, if you talk about this block parties, so you can say that they change the urban space for a day or two in order to perform that the city could be like this, for example, without cars or so. And also from the point of view of Jacques Rancière's democracy theory, you could say that they in a way are not against anything, but they are in a way maintaining the disagreement and dispute, which Rancière thinks that is the main idea of democracy, not contesting, but maintaining the sphere for contesting, you could say. And there are lots of or some research on urban DIY activism, and you can find see that our cases are very much in the same line. But about the anti-austerity question, not really. These activisms in our sample are not very much anti-austerity. They are more like middle class, educated middle class, urban middle class people who are doing those, not really and well-to-do people, not really those who are in need for more than, let's say, need for local food or for local organic food that they cannot find in the grocery store nearby or something. But anyway, it seems that what's taking place in Finland is something more global than something that takes place only here. So this is the picture of how we make it so that we think that the self-organized city is here in the middle, and then we have these different kind of angles or themes that cross each other, but you can find that these kind of topics you can find there. But how we see it is that this is not just kind of new kind of activism, but it also means that somehow the system is changing, that we are going to have this kind of new fourth sector, which is not going to institutionalize to the old NGO third sector, but it can take place and maintain in the fourth sector through social media groups. They just organize through Facebook, for example. They don't need to register anywhere, but they can still work in the society. And it means also that there appears new kind of relationships to the old sectors, and this is something that all the old sectors and the society as a whole should somehow start to take into account and try to understand what kind of relationship they should construct with the emerging fourth sector. So here's a kind of simplification of the NGO type of work and this kind of new urban activism. So the fourth sector is through social media, lots of events and action, sense of community is important, networking, momentariness, proactivity, also quite usually YIMBY ideas there. So my argument here is this. Internet and social media means that there have become new individual and collective agencies in self-organizational networks that we call the fourth sector. It means changes in social cohesion, production, and political mobilization. And it somehow, well, we don't know very well how, but it's going to restructure our social and economic relations. And it's going to reconstruct also cities and the society and their power relations. And we think it's a kind of positive perspective what we have here. A kind of enlarged resource basis that we can have if more and more people are interested in that kind of proactive activities, and also a kind of enlarged democracy. So we're not saying that the old representative democracy is rubbish, but we're saying that it's going to enlarge somehow, and we should somehow start to think how to integrate this old, let's say, real democracy and this new kind of straightforward DIY action, community-based local democracy with each other. But of course, there are open questions. Is it just a bricolage of social action, or is it really a real structural thing, as we argue? It's emerging, so is it still a kind of incubator of new kind of corporations? We don't know that yet, because there's have been only a couple of years when these have been active. And so, of course, we can ask that what kind of value basis there is, and can this kind of search for public local good somehow turn to evil perspectives? That's possible, of course. And then we should ask, who are these new kind of multifaceted citizens, not only consumers maybe any longer, or just taking what the city says, but taking more active role as citizens, and of course who are not, and usually they are not those who are not very well to do in other areas of the society elsewhere. So, and ask also, how does representative democracy preserve its legitimation if more and more people start to feel that they can somehow work without the democratic system, just do it themselves as communities? And how should we regulate the power of this kind of new networks? And we should also start to talk about new kind of value regimes, and how to measure and support and incentivize that kind of sharing economy or urban commons communities when they emerge, and also how to integrate them to the system. Taxation, for example, is very important here. So we have some publications here. Only a couple of them are in English, but you can maybe read them if you're interested, and I'm happy to hear your comments and answer your questions. Thank you.